Okay, I think the recording feature is still going to kick off here in a second, so you may hear a message pop up saying that the host has the recording feature on. That tends to happen 1 or 2 minutes after I click the button here. But again, let me go ahead and introduce myself and get us started here. My name is Adam Freeze. I'm a technical project manager on the PARCC team here at Pearson. One of my main responsibilities is working with the TestNAP online testing platform, but I tend to work in a variety of technology areas. So I am excited to be able to talk with you today. I know we're getting really close to the administration of the DC. So there's probably some of you on the call here that have questions that really need to get answered either today or very soon. So we do have Kenny Taylor. He's another member of our project team here, and he'll be answering questions through the Q&A section. If anyone wants to ask questions on there, he'll be responding as I'm going through the material. Otherwise, I'll just try and make this as helpful as possible for everyone on the phone here, because I know we are so close. I know you guys have other things you could be spending your time on right now. So with that said, why don't we go ahead and jump in and get started. This presentation here on the screen is primarily for technology coordinators, but if we have anyone else either listening to the recording or joining us on the phone here, there's plenty of other things that you can learn if you're a different role in your school by watching this presentation. So if you have any questions, again, feel free to ask as we're going through. I'll take a couple Q&A breaks as we're going through these topics as well, and we'll see where we can get in the next hour and a half there. So the way we laid out the agenda today was first we want to talk really quickly about technology readiness, some of the technology guidelines, school planning steps, and the overall technology setup. I have no doubt that a lot of you on the line probably already have a good portion of this work done. So I'll try not to spend a ton of time on any of this, but really the preparation steps are the key responsibility for technology coordinators, is getting everything set up ahead of time so that on day one of testing, the administrators can go in and do their job without issue. So there's not supposed to be a whole lot of upkeep for the technology coordinators once all the prep work is done. So we'll go through that. And then as far as what you will be concerned with during actual testing is probably the early warning system or the TestNAP error codes that come up, because I'm pretty sure test administrators are going to come running to you guys the second that one of these error messages pops up, and they're going to be looking for an answer, and the student's going to need to get back into the test as quickly as possible. So we'll go over the different scenarios and situations that typically come up in the early warning system and error codes, and then we're going to wrap it up with a quick run through or a demo of the infrastructure trial. That process really doesn't take very long, and again, most of you have probably gone through this to some degree already. It's never too late to do an infrastructure trial, And another reason I like to end on it is because it kind of brings everything else that we're talking about during the presentation together. So that's kind of the agenda for the call. So why don't we go ahead and get started with technology readiness. All right, you will see this page referenced frequently, not just for technology stuff, but also on the administration side. This PARCC.Pearson.com webpage is extremely useful. We've kind of made it a hub for all of our documentation and information that we're putting out there. So again, since we're focused on technology here, the technology setup page has several things that are very useful to you guys on the phone here. So one of the things that I highlighted initially is the technology guidelines, and we'll go through the rest of this stuff later. But the technology guidelines take us out to this parconline.org page. These are the requirements, the official requirements for PARCC related to hardware, software, any of the combinations. Really, the benefit of this particular document is the minimum specifications and the recommended specifications. The minimum specifications will get you through testing this year. So if you do have Windows XP, for example, that is something that will get you through this year because it is a minimum specification. But then we also have recommended specifications, and those are the ones that are going to get you through the multiple next year, 3-4 years out. And so if you're looking to maybe upgrade existing technology, that's kind of the specifications you want to look at when you're thinking about purchasing and whatever budgeting plans that you want to put forward for the next year or two. This is all pretty standard stuff. It's again what's included in that document there. So we have Windows, desktop, laptop, tablet devices, Mac, desktop, and laptop, and some of the browsers that go with that. We do support Linux on desktop and laptop. Fedora, it has to be versions Fedora 19 or 20, or Ubuntu 12.04 or 14.04, and those work on the Firefox browser only. And they are going to need Java installed, same as the Windows or Mac devices, but that's a little bit more complicated on Linux as well. So we have some documentation out there around that, but those are the requirements if you're thinking about setting up machines in the future. And then as far as our tablet and mobile devices go, we have the Chromebook, iPad, and Android. For Android, you would need the Lollipop operating system, and a 9.5-inch screen or larger is required. Okay, school planning. One thing I like to reference frequently during these trainings and presentations is the fact that technology coordinators really need to work with the district test coordinator, with the test administrators, to pull this PARCC assessment off successfully. So it's definitely teamwork, it's communication. So school planning is a good way to start that early on. So hopefully a lot of you guys have gone through this already, where you've talked with them about some of the resources that are out there, some of the technology setup steps, and you see those check marks there, and those are the 4 main responsibilities that all technology coordinators have, and that'd be configuring the network, Proctor Caching devices, configuring the testing devices and using the system check tool, and then setting up the TestNAP configuration in Pearson Access next. So if you've done those 4 things and you're confident in doing those 4 things, you're off to a great start, because those are the main responsibilities you got to worry about. There's some additional information on the resources that we were talking about. One is the accessibility or assessment capacity planning tool. This is just an Excel spreadsheet, but it helps if school administrators are having a hard time figuring out, all right, we have this many devices, this many labs, this many students, these are the tests that we want to take. So how long is our window going to be? how many days are we going to have with testing? That spreadsheet has some built-in formulas that can help with that. And again, it's just a guide to help you get where you need to go. There's no hard rules in there about what you can and can't do, but it's a helpful little tool that we have out there. And that's actually on the same page. This is linked here in the PowerPoint if you have the PowerPoint, but it's on the same page as the technology guideline, that parconline.org page. And then we also have training modules out there for any of you who may not be, you don't like to look at the guides, you don't like to read, you like to actually see it done. We have a lot of training modules related to infrastructure trial, PNP, setting up Proctor Caching, everything like that. We have those modules that are actual videos and PowerPoints that show you how to go through those processes. And then on the opposite side, we have the technology user guides, which are the guides you can read at your own pace. There's screenshots in there. So we have a lot of information in both areas for whatever you're looking for. And then finally, we like to reference the accessibility features and accommodations guidelines. We know that's a big topic in a lot of schools. It's very important that those students are treated fairly. They have all the same functionality that other students do, or the same access that other students do. So we have a lot of documentation out there about accessibility features and the guidelines. Okay, so those have kind of been our intro slides. We're going to jump into technology setup now. Which is, I'm sure, the meat and potatoes of what most of you here are interested in. Again, I kind of put checkboxes there for configure the network, Proctor Caching, talking about the system check tool and device preparation, and then we'll go into TestNAP and Proctor Caching configurations and Pearson Access next. And I'll try and jump out of the PowerPoint a little bit as we're going through this stuff and give some live demos of how to do a lot of this, just in case any of you out there do have any questions or you want to see it done really quick. And then that might help, if any of you guys have questions about some of the specifics of any of these for your school or district, then we can try and answer those at the same time. So we will begin with configure the network. Really basic stuff here. Just making sure that the internal ports that we need for Proctor Caching, port 4480 and 4481, are open between the testing device and the actual Proctor Caching machine. So if your Proctor Caching machine is at the district level, you might want to think or make sure that those ports are active from the individual schools all the way to the Proctor Caching machine. And then you have the basic internet ports for TestNAP at the top there. Port 80 is something that's fairly common, along with port 43. And these are the three URLs that all need to be whitelisted for the test content for TestNAP to run successfully in secure mode. And we kind of have the same thing for Pearson Access next down here for your test administrators. And then for support emails, so emails from our support center, if you've called in a ticket, they're trying to follow up with you. Just in case you need to whitelist the @support.pearson.com link or domain, that would be something you'd have to take care of as well. I guess we jump right into Proctor Cache here. Before I do that, I just want to say one more thing, I guess, on the network configurations or the configure the network. The content filters are one of the biggest call drivers on the technology side. So sure, these are, for most networks, these are the whitelist URLs and the ports. This is really all you have to take care of. There are some networks out there that are very highly restricted, very locked down, blocking certain extensions, which can cause videos not to play or images not to come up. So just understanding that the content filters are a very important piece of delivering these online assessments. Try and keep that in mind. And running through the infrastructure trial to actually see that videos are playing, that images are coming up, that's a very helpful step in the process to making sure that everything you need as far as traffic along the network is allowed. And then there's also, again, just an FYI, there are some content filters out there that if some of this stuff isn't whitelisted, it may still run, but it may be scanning it. There's certain, maybe a virus scan software on the network that will scan packets from stuff that isn't whitelisted and really slow down performance. So again, just content filters, I wanted to stress that a little bit more since it is one of our higher technology call drivers on our side. Okay, so let's jump into Proctor Caching here. Proctor Caching is the Pearson supplied software that works with TestNAP to reduce bandwidth requirements. What it does is it allows you to pre-cache all the test content locally, so not every student device is trying to access it from the Pearson servers, it's just accessing it from a local source on your network. And that reduces the burden on your ISP, on your WAN connection, and it eliminates a lot of redundancy as far as requesting content goes. Really, all of the testing devices that are in a session are going to be requesting a lot of the same content. Maybe not the same order, but a lot of the same content. And then, I guess I would just add a little bit more about me. I've worked kind of how I got into technology was when I was in high school, and our technology coordinator, who was also our gym teacher, was starting to get a lot of equipment donated to the school from businesses in the area. And it was just a hodgepodge of equipment. We were getting hubs, not switches, for our network closets. It was Gateway E1000s or Dell GX150s. It was just, the lowest stuff you could get. But it was all free, and we were kind of throwing it all together. So I understand that a lot of schools have very unique setups, and that presents a lot of challenges, especially when it comes to bandwidth and trying to deliver a technology-based online, high-stakes assessment like this. So with that in mind, Pearson has put a lot of work into this Proctor Caching software and a lot of testing, and it's something that has worked very reliably in these schools with that situation. So, those very unique situations. So it can be applied in a variety of environments. We'll go into Proctor Caching a lot more here, but I kind of just wanted to give that rundown of, again, why it's so important to use this software and why it's so beneficial. And this is just another quick, graphic of how much traffic that can eliminate. So we see on the right that the test cache station has all of the content there already with the devices accessing it readily, whereas without Proctor Caching, all the devices are actively reaching all the way up to the TestNAP server for that content. And that's very demanding for a lot of schools. Some of the requirements for Proctor Caching. Proctor Caching runs on Windows or Mac OS only, so you can't install the Proctor Caching client on, say, a Chromebook or an iPad. But that doesn't mean that Chromebooks and iPads can't run Proctor Caching. So I'll go into that. It'll make more sense when we get to the TestNAP configurations as to why that happens. But basically, whatever you set up as the Proctor Caching server, any student device that logs into a session will automatically point to that Proctor Caching server. So it doesn't have to be Mac or Windows to make use of Proctor Caching. just the Proctor Caching server itself, not be a Chromebook or an iPad. Some more of the requirements can be found at the link there. It's that technology setup page that we were at earlier. We already talked about the ports to whitelist, but we mentioned it again there. So 4480 and 4481 primarily for Proctor Caching. It also requires a static IP address. So don't set the Proctor Caching machine up with DHCP. It might change if it gets rebooted or something like that. In the middle of testing, it might cause a lot of issues for you. So it would be best to set it up with a static IP address. Also, if you are interested in setting an upstream proxy, we have the tips on Proctor Caching section of the Proctor Caching user guide out there that will help you through that process. So that's a little bit more detail than we go into here today. It's not a recommended or not recommended process. It's completely up to the schools. But if you want some more information on setting that upstream proxy, check into the Proctor Caching user guide there. And then the System Check Testing Capacity tab will help determine both network capacity and that the Proctor Caching device is working. And we'll actually give a demo of that here in a little bit. All right, what's new? We did release a new version of Proctor Caching for this year. So if any of you did the field test last year and still have that Proctor Caching software installed, that software does work. It will be fine to use this year if that's the choice you want to make. But we do have a new version that was released in November. And that new version is really what we're encouraging everyone to upgrade to for a lot of the reasons listed in the bullets here. So we made a lot of enhancements to the user interface, and we repaired some bugs as well. So like one was an issue where Internet Explorer 11 wasn't displaying the actual list of cached content. So that's one thing. But overall, it's just been a lot of little enhancements, a much better user interface, and a couple bug fixes. So again, if you haven't upgraded to it, the old version works, but the new version should work a lot better. Okay, as far as the Proctor Caching setup goes, it's right on the technology setup page, the parc.pearson.com, under technology setup. There's a Proctor Caching downloader there, and I'll go out there in just a second. But it's really just download it, run the installer, and then use the system check to verify that you have connectivity to the Proctor Caching software from a client device. All right, here is just a screenshot of the system check tool that we're going to go into next and what I'm going to demo next. So this is the check your system portion of the system check tool. So on this tab, we're more worried about the client device, whether or not the browser, the Java environment, the operating system are all compatible with TestNAP. So if any one of those, if you click the start button, the green start button there, you'd see really quick if any of the software on that device was not going to run TestNAP successfully. And then in the bottom half of the page, we have verification. That's what you use. So the top part there, the 3 checks that it does on browser, Java, and operating system. The check that it does there is for just, it does a basic check to say, all right, you should be able to stand up a secure version of TestNAP based on what you have on this device. But what the bottom part does is where you're supposed to start a browser, go to the address, enter the username and password. That actually stands up TestNAP in a secure version. So it's just a one-item form that says, if it opens, it says congratulations, you've successfully opened TestNAP. But that's actually your check to make sure that it's working the way it should. And then the other tab, which we'll be going into, is the testing capacity tab. Here you can see really quick, what your direct connection to Pearson is. And then you can add Proctor Cache machines as well. And then you kind of see, all right, maybe I have a couple of Proctor Cache machines I want to test in this lab. I want to see which one I can connect to better. And then I can also compare it to direct Pearson. So in this case, had about 800 students direct to Pearson on the connection. If I use Proctor machine A, it's up to 1,300. If I use Proctor machine B, it's up to 1,600. So typically, using Proctor caching, you tend to see anywhere from 2 to 10 times as many students being able to test as without Proctor caching. I know there are some schools out there that have very high connections to the network. We were in New Jersey last week. I think there was one school that had a download speed of around 700 megabits per second to the client we were at, which is pretty crazy. When you get that high, I think you start to see some discrepancies in the numbers of direct Pearson versus what your Proctor Cache machines are. So again, this is just an estimate of what you can test. Like for instance, in the screenshot, if I have 1,303 students, if I get to 1,304, it's not all of a sudden going to break. It might be before that, it might be after that. This is really just a rough estimate. So that's kind of just how the algorithms and formulas work. So just making sure everyone on the phone here is kind of aware of that. So why don't we do a quick demo of installing Proctor Cache and running the system check to make sure that it actually works. All right, so we're going to go out to the technology setup page. And we have the Proctor Caching installer right here that we can click on and download. I won't download it because it does take a little bit of time. So I'm just going to go ahead and snag it off my desktop here. And this is really like any other installer. So you can accept the defaults if you choose, or you can make any kind of edits as you go. So I have my proxy server information that populated automatically there. I choose my install folder, decide where I want the icons located, and then I just say that yes, I want it to start automatically when the install completes. That'll also make the service start automatically every time the machine reboots. So that's a good thing to leave check mark there. You just want the service running all the time in the background. Give you a quick summary, and then it would go ahead and install. And again, I have it installed already on my device, so I will quit the installer here. But why don't we, just to make sure it's working, I'll actually access system check here. So we're going out to system check right now, and I am going through this a little bit faster. I know it's nice that we have the recording, which will help, but at the same time, we have a lot of material to go over in the hour and a half here, and we're already down to only an hour left. Plus, I want to have time to answer your guys' questions, because I know, like I said at the start, I'm sure there are some questions where you guys need them answered quickly since we're coming up on the administration here. So I'll go through it. I'll try and explain it as I'm going, but if I'm going too fast, feel free to ask questions when we get to that section or rewatch the presentation later. So I'll go ahead and hit start here really quick just so you can see it gives me the browser version, Java environment, operating system very quickly here. And I could go out here. I can't launch the secure version during a WebEx, so that would kind of fail out on me. But if I went out to this link, just entered username for username, password all lowercase for password, it would stand up a secure version of TestNAP for us. But here, we are interested in testing to make sure that our Proctor Caching software that we just installed is working correctly. And typically, you would do this from a client device. You wouldn't do this from the device that you just installed Proctor Caching on. You would do it from where the student would be. So the display name doesn't matter. Okay. This is my test machine. IP address. And the port is always 4480 for Proctor Caching. That's new. So they just added that. Let's see if it lets me do this for us. Okay. So now we've added our machine here. And you saw that error message because it was saying, hey, you can't run this on the machine that you're currently on. So it's gotten a little bit smarter since the last time I've done this. But in this case, I could click Start, and it's going to run through a quick check of my bandwidth, of my download speed, both to the Proctor Caching machine and direct to Pearson, and it'll come back with testing capacity. So this will take a little while, so we're not gonna stay on it, but that's all we have to do. If this comes back with results, that it downloaded successfully, it gives us a testing capacity, then you'll know that you have access to your Proctor Caching machine. The other way that you can check this is just by typing in the address, the IP address, :4480, and it'll take you directly to the Proctor Caching interface. So right now I have no tests on here. We'll get some cache later when we're going through our infrastructure trial. But as you can see, I do have access from the device I'm on to the user interface. So we have verified that Proctor Caching is set up and accessible across the network. So I know Proctor Caching is actually one of the big question areas, so why don't I stop here and just take a couple questions really quick for the next couple minutes and see if there are any Proctor Caching questions out there that I can answer right away. And Kenny, do you know, have you seen any that you haven't been able to answer so far that you'd like me to answer on the phone here?
Not yet. Nothing's come through that I haven't been able to answer. If anyone wants to throw it in the Q&A, we can certainly bring it up.
Kenny, I apologize. I can't hear you. So I'm kind of looking at the Q&A section here right now.
I'm sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
All right, so let me read Brian's question. It looks like it's not answered yet. I understand. I know where to put these configurations and which parts are used in which places. Just asking if you could, and just get off the website in this regard. I guess maybe there was an initial question that I missed from Brian on that. Okay, I see. Can you copy and paste these configurations here? Brian, if you do need more details on that, go ahead and type in the question area, and I'll answer that for you. In the meantime, let me go to James. Is this version of Proctor Caching significantly different from previous years, or any gotchas that are different? So I did go over kind of a bullet list of what's different with the software. It's mainly a user interface update. So the user interface is streamlined. It's a lot more responsive. We repaired some defects, like I said, with IE11 not displaying content. We recommend that you upgrade, but it's not required. If you have the field test version and you're comfortable with that, and you really don't want to upgrade, then that's fine. But I mean, the install is pretty quick, and we think the benefits are worthwhile. So if you have time, go through with it. If you don't, then that's totally your call. I wouldn't say there are any gotchas that are different, though. It's minor bug repairs and an updated user interface. All right, I don't see any other questions I should say, so I am going to go on with the presentation. All right, the next section that we're looking at here is device preparation. So up to this point, we have configured our network. We have set up Proctor Caching and verified that the software is working. So we're going to talk about device preparation really quick. So the documents listed here on the technology setup page under technical user guides are built to help prepare devices for day one of testing. So the reason that these were created was because what would happen is a lot of schools would do the infrastructure trial, right? And which is fantastic. But when you're doing the infrastructure trial, you're accessing the PARCC training site. So you're accessing that URL on desktop and laptop devices, or you're accessing the on the app, you're accessing the PARCC training customer site on the app. So what happens is, you handle, at that time, you end up handling the pop-ups on the desktop and laptop device, and on the tablet device, you end up choosing the right customer site at the time, which is PARCC training. But when it comes to the spring assessment and testing there, you notice that all of a sudden, hey, I got new pop-ups at this URL. For you guys in DC, I think it's dc.testnap.com, that you wouldn't have access during the infrastructure trial. So these setup guides kind of provide a way of making sure that devices are completely ready for the students prior to them logging in on testing day. Because if they're at the wrong URL, or if they have to deal with pop-ups, or if they're on the TestNAP app and they're not at the right customer site, then what happens is they enter in their login credentials and they can't get into their test. Either they're clicking on pop-ups and they don't know what to do, or they're at the wrong site and it keeps coming back with invalid credentials even though they've typed it right. So I would say these guys are definitely worth a look. I can go out there really quick right now and just show you what I'm talking about. So we'll go back to the parcc.pearson.com page, and I do hate being in the PowerPoint. I'd much rather just demo everything to you guys, so I might bounce back and forth here. But under technical user guides, here's where we have these guides set up. So I'm on Internet Explorer right now. If I want to check this out, I can see my setup steps are to disable the pop-up blocker, accept the Java plugin, and disable the password saving feature, and then add some verification steps as well. The verification steps are actually, this is relatively new. We've had it in our last couple technology bulletins, and we've had these documents out here a couple weeks. But for anyone that's not aware already, we have added the username and password account credentials to all of the TestNAP sites. So that includes the PARCC training.testnap, here, which is for the infrastructure trials. It also includes dc.testnap.com for your spring assessments. So if I was to, if I were in your shoes and I was on my testing devices wanting to make sure that everything was ready to go, I could go out to dc.testnap.com. I could log in on any device with username and password, all lowercase, and I can see, hey, are there any pop-ups that are going to show up? Or is my app where it should be? Is it on the right customer site? So this is just some great documentation to make sure that if there are any final setup steps that maybe haven't been taken yet, that it'll help you through those to make sure that devices are completely ready for the student to sit down on day one and take the test. All right, back into the PowerPoint here. This is kind of a screenshot, so I have the dc.testnap.com here. I would type in username and password, and it would get me through all those pop-ups that I was just talking about there. Some additional user guides for Chromebook and iPad. Most of the stuff you're probably through already, but if you have any questions about setting up either the new TestNAP or an updated TestNAP 8 app, or setting them into like secure mode for Chromebooks, they need to be in kiosk mode. For iPad, it would be guided access mode. So if there's any questions about setting up the app or make it run in secure mode, these documents here are great resources for that. Whether they're managed devices or unmanaged, either way. Okay, so now we're jumping into our TestNAP setup within Pearson Access Next. So again, what we've done so far on our checklist is we've configured the network. We've made sure our firewall, any other content filters are set so that traffic will run smoothly. We've set up Proctor Caching and verified it worked, and we have our devices set up so we know that they're ready for the students to just log in. So next we can jump into configuring the TestNAP setup. And this can be done out of order. It's really just kind of guidelines here from us, but as long as all 4 things get checked off, that's the important part. So the TestNAP setup within Pearson Access Next is under Setup and TestNAP Configurations. And once you're in there, you'll have some tasks. The task you'd be interested in is to create or edit the TestNAP configuration. I'm going to do a demo of this for everyone as well. Once we're creating it, it's really just filling out the blanks, the configuration name, selecting the organization, which would either be at the district level or the school level. And then you also have your Proctor Caching machine information, an IP address and port. Port, again, is always 4480. And then you also are able to set the response file backup locations for Windows and Mac devices. So with the response file backups, I mean, typically what we see is people leaving the defaults and then maybe adding a secondary location that would be on the network somewhere. If you're going to add a network location, we would recommend that it would be a mapped drive, and we would also recommend that there be no spaces in the path. And these can also be UNC paths; those do work. But typically, we find if you set these as a map drive, they are more reliable because of that. So recommendation is map drive, but a UNC path will work. But again, if you use a UNC path, it's the same deal, no spaces in the path anywhere. Okay, so at the bottom we would hit create, a blue create button, we'd get this green banner along the top, and it would say success. And then down here we see that we have a configuration called training that was created. When you click on training, we have all of the information that we just created. We can test the connection to the machine. We can also add additional pre-caching computers to that TestNAP configuration. And here's what it looks like if you do add a second machine. So you still have this one selected as the default computer used for sessions, but you can change it to this one if you want it. Completely up to you. All right, so let's do a demo of setting up a TestNAP configuration. All right, and I just decided to click on the system check since our check is done. Really quick, we can just see that, and this again is completely cheating since I'm running this from the same device, but we see that the testing capacity is around 6,000 students, direct connection to the Proctor Caching machine, 1,500 students without it. And, you know, that might be, obviously, like I said, I was cheating here, but you can see typical numbers depending on your network as well. So why don't we get out of system check since we're done with that. And we will go to our training site. So if you didn't know this already, we have the training site out there. It's brown. It is a playground for you guys. You can do whatever you want in here without worrying about messing up anything in your live environment. So again, everything's brown. I'm going to start by choosing my school. So by default, some of you might start off at the district level. Or the state level, depending on where you're at in the organization there in DC. I am going to go to my school. You can set up a TestNAP configuration at the district that all schools will default to. But if you set up, say within that district, you have 16 schools, right? And you have 2 schools that you want to have their own TestNAP configuration, but you want the other 14 to use the district level configuration. The way you would do that is set up the one district level, and then at those 2 schools, just set up a school level TestNAP configuration, and by default, all of the sessions that are at that school will default to the school TestNAP configuration rather than the district level. It always defaults to the lowest one. So if you're a school, it defaults to the school. If you don't have a school TestNAP configuration, it defaults to the district level configuration. So I know that well, I don't know for sure, but let me check. Okay, I do have one out here already. So I'm just going to delete that so we can start fresh. All right, I got a success message, and I can exit tasks up here. So this feature here is kind of nice. I can just click on the drop down by search and show all results. If you're looking at sessions in a school or you're looking at TestNAP configurations, there's not always a lot of those. It's pretty helpful if you just show all the results. That might be easier to find what you're looking for than to actually try and search for it. So in this case, we have nothing, so we are going to create a new one. I'll name it DC test. Since I'm at the school level up here, the only thing that's going to appear here is my school. If I was at the district level, I would see all the schools and the district in my list of optional organizations. All right, computer name is what everyone will see in their sessions when they're choosing a computer. so I don't want to make it anything that they wouldn't recognize. And IP address and port. I'm not going to test the connection yet. I'll do that in the next screen here. We are using the caching software, and I'm just going to stick with the defaults for my response file backup location. All right, so we got our success message. I can click down here on DC test, get to my information here, and why don't I add a second one? And that's a dummy IP address for me, so won't be important though. I just wanted you guys to see what it looks like. We have two machines here, so we can delete one. I can change the default if I wanted, but I'll leave it alone. So why don't I test the connection to this guy here? I'm going to get that the first time I click on it every time in every browser, just because of how the security is set up. So what it tries to do is run a script. So in IE, I get a nice little notification down here to show all content. If I was in Firefox or Chrome, it's not quite that friendly. There would be a shield on the right side for Chrome, I believe, that you'd click on, and you just have to say run unsafe scripts. And I think on Firefox, it's on the left side. It's just a shield that you click on. It's very hard to see, but if you do click on it, then you're able to run the test just fine after that. I think I waited too long to click on it here. Why don't we get in there again and see if it lets me try. All right. So this time when I click on it, I'll get a real result, one way or the other. So I do have a successful connection to that address. All right, so we have completed one of the last steps that we need to worry about, and that's setting up TestNAP configuration as far as prep steps go. I think next we'll probably talk about pre-caching. And there we go. Before I go into pre-caching, is there any question? I know most of you guys probably set these up already. Are there any questions though about how to set those up? How to set up a TestNAP configuration? I do see a hand raised here. I've heard that Java complaint before, Jeremy. It's certainly not new, having the Java requirement. All I can say on that is, the system is what it is, and who knows what it'll be next year. So we may or may not be making any modifications to that, but we'll continue to make the best online testing platform possible. So very basic answer there. You're not going to get a whole lot of details, but it's kind of just is what it is right now. I see a request for watching this video at a later time. We will post it somewhere. I'm not the expert on where these get posted, but I'll work with Bonnie to make sure that we get this somewhere where you guys can access it.
This is Bonnie. We are going to post it to the OSSI website, and we'll send out that link.
Okay.
And the LEA look forward.
Geez, how long have we been going here? Almost an hour? So we have about a half hour left. I'm going to try and get through the rest of the material as quick as I can, and then we will jump into any Q&A. And we might go a little bit over. I don't know how you feel about that, Bonnie, but I'm happy to stick around an extra couple minutes if it helps answer questions for some of you out there.
Sure. I might have to hop off onto our other webinar that's next, but if there are questions outstanding, those should.
And Bonnie, I think I see you're talking, but I can't hear you either. This might be an issue on my side that I can't hear other speakers. Although I know I heard Ann earlier, so.
And Adam, this is Ann. I can hear Bonnie fine, so I'm not sure if it's just on your end.
Oh, I found it. Thank you. Somehow the speaker got muted and the microphone didn't, so that was on my end. I apologize. So Bonnie, I apologize again. I didn't hear you. Are you okay with this going a couple minutes over?
Sure, no problem. I just said that I might need to hop off for our other webinar at 3:30, but folks should feel free to stick around if there are outstanding questions. And I also mentioned that we'll be posting this on our website.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to jump back into it here. Pre-caching. TestNAP configurations, I talked about this already. They work from the school level up, so school will take precedence over a district setup. The pre-caching server option in session details will only show up if there are 2 or more pre-caching machines available to choose from. So like we had 2 set up there. So in session details, anyone who's making a session or editing a session will have the option to choose between devices if you have more than one set up. And then last, in the session or the students in session screen, which is the screen that test administrators are looking at when they're managing their session when they have students actually testing, there is an update cache button that usually displays in that screen, but it will not display if there's no TestNAP configuration set up at all for the school or the district. So that's just a piece of information there. All right, some more steps here. So initial pre-caching of test content is the responsibility of the technology coordinators, but can also be done by a district test coordinator, test administrators, if that's how your school or district wants to do it. But typically, we would say that that is the technology coordinators that should initially pre-cache all test content for the school or district. So we have a couple options for how to do that we'll go into in a little bit. One is to pre-cache by test. This is new functionality as of just a couple weeks ago. And then we can also do it the way that it was being done prior to that, which is pre-caching by sessions. Either way works just fine. But we'll go through both here in a little bit. And then as far as updating the cache afterwards, that would be the responsibility of the test administrator or the district test coordinator. So in this case, pre-caching the test content originally done by the technology coordinator, but if there are updates made where students they've updated their PNP, they now have text-to-speech or anything like that, or color contrast, then as a result of that, the cache would need to be updated if the pre-caching had already been done. So updating that cache based on those changes is the responsibility of the test administrators and district test coordinator. And then your web browser must be configured with Java to allow pop-ups from the IP address and the Proctor Cache machine. And you'll see that when we're going through the actual demo of how to do it. So pre-caching by test is very simple. Under setup, I would go to pre-cache by test. Maybe I have an elementary school, so I'm only interested in grades 3 through 6 maybe. So I'd select grades 3, 4, 5, and 6. I'd select which pre-cache server I want to use, and then I would hit pre-cache. This is the window that would pop up after that. So I would hit pre-cache again. I may get a Java pop-up. I may get some security pop-ups. Whatever happens, I would click allow. I would click run. And then after that, after about 30 seconds or so, it should load up the user interface for the Proctor caching. So you'd see those test forms actually loading and downloading. If you try and do this and you don't have access to the Proctor caching machine, this will not work. Basically, what's happening is you're reaching out to the Proctor caching machine via Pearson Access Next from your device, and it's saying, all right, you're telling that Proctor caching machine what to download. So you're saying, hey, go out to Pearson, find grades 3, 4, 5, and 6 tests, and download them for us. You're telling the Proctor Cache machine that, it says okay, and it goes ahead and does it, and that's when it loads up the window, so you can kind of monitor the progress of those downloads. And typically you'd want to do this 1 to 2 weeks in advance, a few days in advance at the absolute latest. All right, pre-caching sessions. So this is kind of the old way or the previous way of pre-caching. If you were to go into sessions for the district or for the school, you could search for all the sessions. You can do the search, show all results, highlight, click the top button to highlight all the sessions, and then pre-cache those sessions. So you'd select the task for pre-caching test content and click Start. And you'd see for whatever sessions you have, which forms there were, and you'd hit pre-cache. So really it's not too much work either way. If your school does have a few hundred sessions, clicking that checkbox at the top only adds what's on that page into your shopping cart. This will go into the demo here in a little bit too. But that's one thing to keep in mind. So if you do have a few hundred, you might have to go through a couple pages to make sure that you have everything added to the cart before you pre-cache. And I call it a cart, but it's what's being managed, and that'll be very clear once I get back into Pearson Access next year. This is just an example of the pop-up that comes up for Java. Click OK or Run. Same thing happens. This is what comes up on when you're caching through sessions after you hit the pre-cache button. It's really the same thing. As after this goes for a little while, you should get the window of the Proctor caching machine come up, and this is what you see on that machine. So you're getting some tests. Some are still loading. Some are waiting for those to load. All right, updating cache so this is what the test administrators or the district test coordinators would do. They would click update cache on any new sessions that they create or on any sessions where PMP data is being updated. And they get the same pop-ups where they'd have to click the blue pre-cache button, but it's the same deal. All right, so why don't I do a quick demo of pre-caching. Right in timeout here. All right, so I'm in my training state. I only have Algebra 1 set up for the state here, for the ZZ state on the training site. Normally you'd see 20 tests, all the math and all the English tests. But we'll just go ahead with Algebra 1 here and see if we can get that to work. We'll click pre-cache. Right away it comes up with the user interface, and so it shows that it's downloading. this will automatically refresh here in a little bit. If you're downloading live content, just be aware that there are a lot more forms. For Algebra 1, for instance, there's probably 40 or 50 forms that download. So this page gets very big very quickly when you're downloading the test content this way. Let's go back. So that was very easy, right? You might not even have caught it. I just went to Setup, Pre-Cache by Test. And I can see right away the tests I pick from the menu here, and then I pick which server I want. If I have two servers, I want both servers to have all of the same information. I could do one first. Can't click until I unselect the other one, but I could then, afterwards, I could pre-cache this one as well. So if you need one to be a backup or something like this, this is a good way to get information both PCs pretty quickly. The other way of doing this is if I go to Sessions and Show All Results. So I have 15. If I had 30, for instance, and I'm only displaying 25, if I click on this, I would only get 25 added to my cart up here. This is what I call my cart. So I click the checkbox, I get all 15 thrown up in here. And this is just like Amazon. So when I'm running around doing other stuff, if I go into Students and Sessions, these are in my cart. They stay there until I remove them. That's why I kind of remember it that way. But if I wanted to remove any one of them individually or clear it all together, I would just click the X's here. Another thing, just to make everyone aware of here, when I deleted my TestNAP configuration, all of these sessions lost their TestNAP configuration. But I want you to not panic here, because when I created a new one and I had DC Proctor 1 as my default, that automatically got assigned as the default pre-caching computer for all of my sessions at the school. So if you do have to recreate your TestNAP configuration or anything like that, you do not have to worry about going into all the sessions and manually selecting this. That'll happen automatically. All right, so again, I don't have them down here, but they're still in my cart because I never removed them. So why don't I pre-cache some test content? So here we see a lot of different sessions. I'll go ahead and pre-cache, and they're different tests, different math, different grades, different ELA. More tests, so there's a little bit more delay. But here we go. All of those tests start downloading right after I click that pre-cache button. So if those were all my sessions in the school, then I just pre-cached my entire school, and I'm done with pre-caching on my side as a technology coordinator. All right, well, let me jump back into PowerPoint here. We actually got a ways to go, but a lot of these last slides are screenshots. I'll go through pretty quickly. This is all what we were already looking at in the site there. I guess the one thing I would mention is the refresh, reload, or purge. There is a password required. The password is in the Proctor Caching user guide. It is hard-coded to the software. Next year, I think it'll be an adjustable password, something customizable for you. But this year, as in the past, with previous versions of Proctor Caching, is still built right into the software. So that is a hard-coded password that's available in that guide. Here are some of the statuses that you'll see. Green and yellow are always fine. This just means it's doing something, it's not done yet. The red is where you might have to start either recaching some content, or if you continuously see some errors, then you'll probably want to get in touch with our level 2 tech support, because they can look into some log files and kind of see what's going on there. But either it was a failure to load content from Pearson, maybe the comparison check never ran, it failed out, so that's one thing, or the check ran but the data didn't match. So those are the 3 things that typically end up with those red X's. There is also, on the user interface, a clients tab where you can see which clients are accessing the Proctor Caching software and actually taking tests and getting that content. There's different statuses there as well. OK is active, idle is 5 to 30 minutes since the client was active. There's long idle, up to 12 hours, and after 12 hours, those clients are removed from the lab. One additional thing related to caching that really should be the responsibility of the technology coordinator is to validate that the content is good at the beginning of each day. So there's a lot of things that could cause content failed to load. Maybe, this is just an example, but if there is any minor change, very minor change to any of the forms out there, then it could come back with this failed to load content because there would be a newer version of the content out at Pearson that would know that. So if you happen to see any of this failed to load content, what you should do is probably check the little box by the test and purge the content, and then go ahead and recache that specific test. So either recache the form for that test, or in this case, if it's Algebra 1, I would just go out and recache, go to Precache by test, and choose Algebra 1 and click Recache. Okay. All right, the last 2 sections, both pretty small here. First one is the early warning system. So the early warning system is what's going to pop up for any student that might experience an issue throughout the test. So the early warning system comes up primarily in 3 situations. There are error codes outside of the early warning system that do pop up from time to time, but usually what we see is the early warning system handles most of these. So situation 1 is the response file backup location is not available. So typically what happens here is maybe a school left the defaults and didn't have a secondary, and maybe they have a PARCC user account set up, and that PARCC user account doesn't have permission to save in the profile area, which TestNAP needs for saving log files and saving the SRF file. So if it can't access that response file location, same thing happens on the network. Maybe that PARCC user account doesn't have access to the network location, or doesn't have access to create new files there, anything like that, or just the connection between the 2 goes down. Anything like that can cause the response file backup location error to come up. So that's one. The second is if the test content is unavailable. Usually that means that the Proctor Caching machine is unavailable. If the Proctor Caching machine is on, but content isn't there, typically what will happen is as the testing device is requesting the content from the Proctor Caching machine, the Proctor Caching machine is saying, hey, I don't have that, but I can get it. So it goes up to Pearson, question by question, for the student, and download that content as it's required. So usually the only time you get the test content not available if you're using a Proctor Caching machine is if the actual Proctor Caching machine isn't available. Or if you're not using Proctor Caching machines, If for some reason the link between the TestNAP server and the testing device gets interrupted or any of that traffic gets blocked, that can cause the issue as well. And then the last part is the student responses. So as the student is responding to questions or writing an essay, it's saving to that student response file, but it's also uploading to Pearson Access or to TestNAP. And when it's doing that, if all of a sudden, after the student is logged in, maybe that connection to Pearson again breaks, the ISP goes down, or it's having connection issues, then this error will pop up. The student responses, if it's not uploading to Pearson, this particular message will allow, and we'll see the screenshot in a bit, but that message will allow the student to say, all right, let's continue testing. Well, first it'll come up and say, get the proctor, right? But then the proctor will be able to say, all right, let's finish testing. We'll upload the responses at a later time. And instead of sending the responses up to Pearson, the student will be able to finish testing locally, and the SRF files can be uploaded at a later time. So why don't we go through each one of these situations a little bit. The first one here, error message 1002, or a lot of times 1001. It's really just, it's not an error, it's just a message. It says, please notify your teacher or test proctor, and then have them click here. So when the test proctor actually clicks that box, that's when the useful error message comes up. So this will be actually what's going on, what's the problem. In this case, it's unable to save the response file. Maybe that primary location right there is not available, and there is no alternate location. So in this case, maybe you have the ability to browse to a different location if you want to save the response file in another location for this test, or do a thumb drive or something. But typically what you'd want to do, because the whole class is probably going to see this, unless it is just on a single device, but usually it's class-wide. Usually you'd want to figure out what's going on there. Why can't they save locally, or why can't they save this network? Next, test content. Again, just an example of that not being available. So it tells you that it saved initial responses. You can either retry or exit the test if that connection's been restored. Same exact options when it comes to the student responses being uploaded to Pearson. If students do get kicked out of the test, you want to resume them on the same testing device if possible. By default, and especially on Chromebooks and iPads, those SRF files, or the student response files, are located locally on the testing device. So if you start them off on another device, it's not going to be able to find any responses that may have been saved to that file. In some cases, especially if the student is able to log out safely, those responses do get sent up to Pearson, and there would not be an SRF file. Once Pearson says, hey, I've got all of your data from the response file, then it wipes out that response file from the local location. You'll still have a log file there that will actually, it would say that in there that, hey, Pearson's received the data, so the file deletes. But that's how all of that works. So I know with the response file, I guess the thing I would add is it also, as the student's going through, it kind of builds the response file, but it's constantly deleting that data out there as well. So the student may answer 2 questions, they get uploaded to Pearson. There's nothing in the file, it's just blank until the student answers another question or is halfway through writing an essay or something, and that gets added to the SRF file. So the SRF file is constantly being added to and being removed from at the same time. Whenever Pearson says it has the data, then it deletes from that SRF file. And this is just an error message. It's not an error message. It's a message that pops up when you're resuming a student. So you can see the long response file name there, and you could either browse to it, but by default it will look in either the primary or the secondary location. It'll look in both of those if you're resuming a student. Some best practices regarding the early warning system is to use student testing ticket to document which device the student tested on. This is just in case there are any interruptions. Maybe the student needs to change devices and you're going to want to get those log files later. You don't have time to worry about it right now, but you're going to want to get them later. That's one reason for that. The next is for Chromebooks. A lot of Chromebooks tend to be used for instructional purposes as well, and that uses up memory using those other apps. That could be, if the device had that memory, it would perform better. And then there's also, it can run out of memory and actually cause error messages. So for Chromebooks, we do recommend restarting before each test just to be as safe as possible. It takes 2 seconds to hold down the power button and press it again. Wiping out that memory, that's just an easy way to make sure that the students get the best performance possible. And then for early warning system issues, close out of TestNAP and resume the student in Pearson Access next, and then restart the device and log back into the test. That would be how you'd respond to most early warning issues if you've resolved the issue. Or just restart the device, resolve the issue itself. Last is to validate that the Proctor caching is functional before students log into the test. And that kind of goes with the check we talked about earlier, beginning of the day, make sure that the content out there is accurate, there's no red lights. If there are red lights, purge that old content and download new content. And here's a lot of supporting documentation for all the early warning system stuff. So it's the same basic page, support.assessment.pearson.com /display/testnap or TN. But all the error codes, the directions on how to access SRF files, all of that is out here. So if I get any error messages out here, I can kind of look at those, see what they are. The early warning system triggers that we talked about, there's some more in-depth documentation on those out here. And then here's the SRF and log files that we spent some time talking about there. So locations, how to access them based on what you're using. Chromebooks, iPads, Windows, Macs, etc., and all the default locations. So all of this documentation out here is very helpful to review beforehand and then maybe use during testing, just to make sure that you can get students back into testing mode as quickly as possible. All right, last piece here, and I know we only have about 5 minutes, but I can actually do this in 5 minutes, believe it or not, I really can. So there's a lot of slides in here that say, what the purpose of a infrastructure trial is, why it's helpful. Just running a dress rehearsal in general is best because you get everyone involved, right? You get the district test coordinator, you get the test administrators, you all kind of figure out what you need to communicate to each other about, and then if you have the time, since it always comes down to a matter of time, right? You can also involve students in the infrastructure trial as well and have them actually log into the secure test and test out your devices for you. But that is totally up to you at the school level. So rather than going through all these slides, all these screenshots that talk about pretty much what I just said right there, I'm just going to jump into Pearson Access next really quick and start from the beginning. So we'll go to the home page here in the training site. I'm going to start by going to students and creating some sample students. Just because these are sample students doesn't mean that students can't log in. This is going to create actual testing tickets that students can log into for an infrastructure trial, or teachers can log into if you want teachers running the test instead. So I'll select my organization. I'm going to create a new class. We'll say DC testing. Why don't we do 7th grade? That was a fun time, right? 7th grade math, online, and we will do 99 students since that's the max. Now I could add another 99 students to this session or to this class. So I could add another 99 students to that exact same class if I wanted to, but you can only create 99 at once. So it only takes a second there, but so now I have 99 students in a DC testing class. So the next thing I want to do is set up my session. So notice I still have those 15 sessions over here. I don't want to play around with these anymore. So I'll clear them out. And I will create a session. DC7 Math. I'll pick a start date of today. The time isn't important, it's not enforced. You can set it just to help scheduling, but it's not a required field, and it's not going to say if I set it at 7 p.m. It's still going to let me log in before that. The date is the only part that's enforced. So I see my 2 caching computers that I set up earlier. I'll choose device 1. Right now, by default, it's set to students, but I want to search by class. And I know I'm looking for this DC testing class. So I will create. And this is just adding all of the 99 students in that class into a 7th grade math testing session. So here they all are. So if I exit the session, go into students and sessions, here's my 7th grade math. Let me start the session. And I can download any of these resources. For the seal codes, there's no seal codes in the practice tests right now, so that's not something you have to worry about. But the student testing tickets, if I want to do maybe 4 per page, here we go. I could print these out for all my students, and they could log in right now since I started the session and begin an infrastructure trial. So with the explanation, that took 6 minutes to go through, but that's all the prep work it takes. I could have 99 students log in across a number of labs right now into the 7th grade math test and actually begin testing. And if I wanted to, I could also update the cache here as well, make sure that this test is pre-cached. Since this happened after I did my initial caching. See, so 7th grade math wasn't there before, but it's downloading now. I actually got one fail to load content, so I will go back and re-download that. But that's everything. That kind of ties everything together here in a nice, neat bow. And really, everything in here is pretty much what I talked about and what I just ran through. So these are all the setup steps we did earlier: configure the network, Proctor Caching, system check, and the TestNAP configuration. These are the setup steps that we just did: create the sample student sessions and unlock those and testing tickets. And these are all screenshots of just how to go through all of those menus that I just did. And that is it. If you do an infrastructure trial here late, I would recommend keeping track of the lessons learned. You know, you might run into a lot of problems, or you might run into almost no problems, but either way, anything you do run into, make sure to take notes so that some action can be taken between now and testing day. Here's some additional documentation around just general setup and the infrastructure trial, and support contacts. So I want to thank everyone again very much for taking the time to join us for this presentation today. I will hang around for a while here yet and answer some questions. But again, I hope this helps with some of you, you know, if you're still in the middle of your setup steps, or if you just had some specifics that you were still wondering about. So thank you very much again, and let's see if we have any questions here at all before we wrap up the call. Okay, Abu Bakar Rashid. I apologize, I'm terrible with names, and I have a name that my last name, people are no good with either. So my apologies, still trying to understand as to why did I come across where the device is out of memory. Abu, is this a Chromebook that you're asking about? I'm going to, all right, yeah, I'm going to assume it's a Chromebook, and it is, okay. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier. The Chromebooks that are used, you know, for instruction, we've seen that having them open, accessing a number of apps, and then trying to back out and use TestNAP, that the memory gets used up very quickly by TestNAP because of the log files and student responses that it's sending out. If you reboot the device and use TestNAP and only TestNAP after booting up the device, we haven't seen these issues. That's just in general. Maybe you've seen something unique in your school, but I think that's why we came up with the recommendation to reboot those Chromebooks prior to testing. And I know, I think there was a mini release recently that was also targeted to help with that that error of, you know, the memory running out there, just to try and make better use of the memory on the Chromebooks. So that could have also helped. But that's all the information I have about that error. I just know that it's now our recommendation that those devices be rebooted prior to testing on them. Yep, no problem. Or is there anyone else that has questions out there? I'd be more than happy to answer them. I don't think I see any other in the list right now, or any other ones in the list right now. And it looks like Bonnie had to join the other call, so we went just a few minutes over time. But again, I just want to thank everyone, and you know, hopefully this presentation was helpful. Have a great rest of your day, and if you do have any questions, shoot them through Bonnie, and I'd be more than happy to take those and try and get back to you guys through email as well. So thanks again. Have a great day. Take care.